What?
So this is Tim and Karen Goldstein, and they're from Autism Society.
Tim was diagnosed with Asperger's 5 years ago, and Karen was diagnosed with ADHD, and they're going to share their experiences.
Thank you very much. Well, what we wanted to talk to you some about is, autism, and what we're going to talk about even more is called neurodiversity. And neurodiversity isn't just autism, it's kind of taken in that ADHD and people who are maybe, OCD kind of things. Really, neurodiversity is just people that think differently, that's all. Just a different way of thinking. So that's kind of why we put these crazy pictures up here is, as you remember growing up as a kid, you watched different kind of cartoons and such that had funny characters, and they all acted very differently from each other and very differently from each of you. But we accepted all of them as being really cool and really being fun. But then we get in school and somebody's different, and we don't quite necessarily look at it the same way. As they said, I was diagnosed. I actually have autism. And I'm not a great example, I would say, of somebody who has autism, because autism is very complex and it covers a super, super wide range. So it's very difficult to say what somebody that has autism is like. For instance, you don't normally see a lot of girls that have autism. Well, that's because the diagnosis rates are very low. But guess what? I work with girls that have autism day in and day out. So it's a very common thing, but it's not what you're used to. So just remember that with autism, even though I can speak really well to you, maybe other people that have autism won't be able to speak real well to you. And then Karen?
Really funny because I didn't realize that I actually wore the same shirt. But I'm looking, I'm like, oh wow, that looks familiar. See, that would be called ADHD, I guess. That was a good example. Not that it was planned by any means, but what happens is with ADHD, I look normal here, but inside here, there's so many things going on. In school, which I will let you know, I did go to 12 years of Catholic school, so I'm very pleased and honored to be asked to come here and speak. What happens is you have many different thoughts and ideas going through your head. So I would be told, you're daydreaming, stop daydreaming and pay attention. You're not paying attention, you're not going to learn. What happens is, with ADHD, you're probably mostly very artistic, and you're very, you think way out of the box. You're the person who has the ideas. You bring up great ideas, but you're not so much the great implementer, right? So you may think of all these great things, but it gets hard for you to start. So maybe procrastination, or you just don't finish. Now that's where learning about things like this and how people think is where we can use each other's strengths. Because there's someone out there that they like to be the implementer, and they do not like to come up with an idea. So that is where you need to find out how different people actually think, not their label. I am not ADHD. He is not Mr. Autism. That's how our brain processes, and that's really all it is. It's a difference of the way the brain processes. And I need to hit.
Yeah, you're in charge of that.
I'm the spacebar girl. Hold on. So in neurodiversity, which I guess you would say is, I think most people probably look at autism, Asperger's syndrome as mostly where they look at it being neurodiversity. Like I said, it also includes, some people have, I have generalized anxiety, which means my anxiety is not just, oh, I'm anxious for a test. It means that inside, I'm constantly like this. I constantly am on edge, I guess, maybe. You know, it sometimes stops me from doing things. But in this case, neurodiversity, as you can see, how many people who are very well known, maybe not all known to you at your age, but these people all created something absolutely amazing. Now, when they were in school, because they thought differently and they acted differently, they were probably maybe teased.
Actually, many of them have told the stories about being teased
right.
as kids in school. So not just probably.
They were.
I know Daryl Hannah has talked a lot about how she was.
And she's very much an advocate. I mean, she comes out and she speaks like we do very much because it's that important to her. See, when things like that happen, Susan Boyle, Temple Grandin is actually from Boulder, Colorado. Pardon?
Fort Collins.
Oh, Fort Collins?
Yeah,
she's in Fort Collins, and she actually started, she's one of the four founders, I guess.
She started speaking about this back to help kids and help schools back in the 90s. So she's been at it a long, long time.
Right, and that's because she has it. And let's see, Albert Einstein, Isaac Newton, you learn all about those in school. Michelangelo, I mean now, he's the one, right, that did the Sistine Chapel. Can you imagine what people said about him when he's laying on his back?
Month after month.
Month after month, painting. Like, who does that? So, is that someone that maybe you would look at as being really kind of different and like, woo, a little out there? You know, these are people that today we look at what they've created and what they've done, and it's amazing. So really what it is finding people like this that we think are really different. They each have a strength, and those strengths come out, and it's just a matter of learning them and accepting them.
Then how many of you were Pokemon fans? Any Pokemon fans? Cool. So do you know who Satoshi is? Satoshi was the guy that invented Pokemon. So Pokemon was invented by a guy who was on the autism spectrum. So it's kind of funny, all these things that we fall in love with and that we like, and then you go find out that it came from that person that in school you thought was just weird and different. But they're the ones who had the creative things. Kind of funny. Karen talked a little bit about neurodiversity, but I'm just going to kind of give you maybe try and give a little picture that you can kind of hold in your head a little bit. Neurodiversity is really just this whole idea that the way our brains are wired and shaped and put together can vary just as much as any other parts of our bodies. You know, when I look around the room, I see that there's girls, there's boys. There's some of you have dark hair, some of you have light hair. Some are taller, some are shorter. And we accept that as all being normal. But we don't think about how brains can be different from each other. We just assume everybody's brain is just like everybody else's brain. But they're very different. And everybody, based on the way their brain is shaped and wired, will perceive the world and process the world very differently. So all this is really trying to show is just imagine if we were to take this whole bag full of confetti and glitter, and on every one we would take a little tiny marker and we'd write down a different way that a person could be. And we just throw them all up in a cloud. And then we just try and group them by ones that are similar. We're going to end up with this big, huge group, and that gets referred to as neurotypical. And neurotypical doesn't mean that they're special or anything. It just means that's most people in the world. So we call them typical because that's what most people are. And then anything outside of neurotypical, so in other words, meaning somebody who thinks differently than the way a typical person would think, anything outside we just call neurodiverse, just meaning they don't think the same way as a neurotypical does. And what's real interesting when you kind of look at it in this type of pattern versus the pattern that I think you might have heard where people talk about low function and high function is This takes into account that, you know what, you could be neurotypical and still have some neurodiverse traits, or you can be neurodiverse and still have some neurotypical traits. So in other words, these traits are all mixed up. Did any of you ever play with the little pickup sticks when you were a kid? You know, you'd dump them out and, you know, you'd pick up a handful, and I don't even remember how you scored the game. Do you? That one? Anyone remember that game, or is that one too old? Okay, we got a few that played it. So, good. We got a few. There's got to be an electronic version of it, I swear. There's got to be. But if you just think of these pickup sticks, they were just different length sticks of different colors, and you kind of threw them down, and I don't quite remember how, you know, what you counted when you picked them up. But if you imagine those just being broken to different lengths, and each length representing how much of something you had and the color you had, and each of us were to grab a handful, every one of us would get a different handful in a different mix. We'd all be normal, but we'd all be a little different from each other. And that's really the whole big idea of neurodiversity, is just simple. Our brains are really like computers. They're processors. And our processors work differently. People who are neurodiverse, their processors work differently than people who are neurotypical. They see the world different. We process the world different. We experience the world different. But that doesn't mean that we're not people that can do everything and enjoy things just like everybody else does. It just means we see it differently than you do. Or the way we put it is, you see it differently than we do. So it just depends which side you're looking from.
Yeah, I could even add like neurotypical, since that is, say, probably the majority, maybe all of you. There are some that have a strength of athletics. There's others who don't have a strength of athletics, right? Maybe art, maybe music, maybe, I don't know, speaking, right? Maybe you just communicate well with someone and you make them feel comfortable and welcome. Those are all strengths. And so even in neurotypical or normal people, kids, there's differences. But we accept those as just being okay. And so what we need is to look at diverse as just being a different version, in a way, of typical. That's all. It's just really getting to know that person and what they do. You know, how they think, how they act. I cannot throw a football. As a matter of fact, I cannot throw any kind of a ball. Do not pick me to be on your team at all. Now, if you give me fashion, I absolutely love fashion. I'll take you into a store and you'll come out looking great. I love sparkles. I used to do my daughter's makeup when she was going to all of her dances in high school, because that was my strength. Like I said, football, not so much. Fashion, art, that's me. So people can reject me for this and accept me for that, but I'm still the same person. So, you know, just take me. You know, throw out the part you don't like, but keep the part you do. Oh, I'm clicking.
You're clicking.
I keep forgetting. Oh, this is a great story.
See, this is a story that comes out of our own marriage. And I'll set it up a little bit, and then Karen tell you the rest of it. You know, as we've said, I have autism. A type is called Asperger's. But when people on the autism spectrum, it's pretty common for us to eat the same thing like for a really long time. You know, there's kind of a joke in the autism community that says, I've packed my child the same lunch for 1.5 years. Except in our family, the way it works, I've packed the same lunch for about 2.5 years for myself. You know, if I find something I like, well, I have to decide every single day. So this is now a story about shopping for my favorite bread that I was just on a kick for.
What was the kind of bread? I forget.
Potato bread.
Potato bread. That was it, potato bread. So we would go, and it would be Walmart. That's where we shopped at the time. And If you've been to Walmart with your mom and dad or any grocery store, you know all the breads are lined up wherever, right? On the shelf, or maybe a couple of shelves. Well, no doubt, every week we'd go and Tim would be like looking.
Yes, I'd be going, reading.
Looking, right? He'd be over there, and he's a big reader. So he would have to read every, little thing, and I'm like, heck's taking him so darn long? I mean, So I'd be like, you looking for the same bread? You're like, yeah, I can't find it. And I'd go over to the shelf, and I'd pick it up, and I'd say, here you go. This went on for like, I don't know, year and a half. Now, for me, I would think, I'd be asking, how'd you do that? Took him a year and a half.
I'm a boy, you don't ask girls.
It took him a year and a half to ask, but he asked. And he said, okay, I got to ask you, how on earth do you pick that bread out so quickly? I said, it's easy. It's the only one that's got an orange thing on the end of it. So I just look for the orange thing on the end, and I go pick it up. That's how it is.
It's not that I'm colorblind. I can see orange just perfectly fine. For instance, in your sweater there, the gray sweater, you've got some orange stripes in it, so I can see orange just fine. But it's not the thing that stands out to me. What stands out to me were the words on the bread. So my brain goes looking at the words and totally didn't even notice that there was a color there. Her brain goes for the color, which worked way better in this case because there was only one brand with that color. So she always just went right here.
My brain is color in pictures. My brain is not words.
So I think that gives you kind of an example, a real-world example of how neurodiversity can work. And just think, because I'm not looking at colors, I'm looking at shapes and words. She's looking at colors. We can be having a conversation about something and not understand what either one is talking about. What this little chart is this is trying to kind of demonstrate in neurodiversity how you can have all these different traits in different varying amounts. So in this case, this one happens to be me, and this one happens to be Karen. And the way you interpret these charts is the more blue you see in each chart, the more struggle the item underneath that particular category is. So you can see, first off, I struggle a lot more in a lot of categories than Karen struggles in. Karen's much closer to being neurotypical, so gets better by with the social things, when to say things, when not to say things. She's a lot better at than I am. But on the other hand, I've got some things that, this one here is something I do really, really well. There's almost no blue. I mean, here's another thing I do really, really well. So I've got my parts that I'm really strong on, but then there's the parts that you don't see that I'm maybe not so strong on. So this just kind of gives you, just that rough idea that it's not just one thing where you say somebody is neurodiverse and that means it describes them all the way. You could have any combination in here and still be neurodiverse, but be very different from the next person. Just like take any two people. No two people are identical. It doesn't matter whether you're neurodiverse or not neurodiverse. Individuals are individuals. And this just helps kind of illustrate and also illustrate that in general the neurodiverse are dealing with more challenge just to deal with society because we don't think the way society tends to think.
And I'd say I think neurodiverse are more technical. I would not have ever come up with this at all. This, I absolutely respect my husband because of the brain he has to do things like this. So what we've learned to do is honor first we had to learn each other's strength, I will tell you that. And then we learned to work with it, and we learned to actually honor it, because do you know how frustrated and how high my anxiety would be if I had to sit in front of a computer and do that? It would be horrible. The chances of it getting finished and completed would probably not happen. You might get a color drawing. I don't know, I'm really good at stick figures. things like that? Absolutely not. This is where the differences in his technical, which is also his career, he's also in the IT industry, is where it shines and it comes out and it helps me. Because in presentations, I go to my husband and I say, Tim, can you please help me with this? So, you know, it's using each other's strengths is really what it is.
Okay, we're going to do a little bit of fun now.
The duck rabbit.
So, now we know that there's a duck or it could be a rabbit. So here, how many people, raise your hand, see a duck? Okay, now how many people see a rabbit? Okay, so the people that see a duck, are you willing to swear that's a duck? I mean, it's real to you, right?
I can also see the
But, okay, so you can see both when you look.
rabbit just makes more sense to my eye.
Okay, so now we're going to go on. We're going to try another one. So we got a couple queued up for you for fun. Okay, so we got two of them here. So let's do the one over here. What's anybody? What do you see? Okay, so I hear a lot of tigers. Yeah. Okay, so I see trees. So, okay, so I think we've gotten down here where we have trees on one side, people are saying, and on the other side we're saying it's a tiger.
I say river. That's the most predominant thing that I'm seeing.
Well, we're going to go just right now between those two. So how many people here say it's a tiger? Okay. How many say it's a tree?
I see both.
Well,
I can see both, but I'm predominantly seeing.
so if we go over to this one, when we look at this one, what do people see in this one?
I see an old woman and a young lady. Oh my goodness.
Okay, so we have both.
I see the old woman.
Right, we have both the young woman with her nose over here, and we have the old woman who's coming this way, and her nose is coming over this way, and so the point. Okay, the point of this whole thing really was to show you that. Now, you all looked at the same scenes, right? I mean, we didn't change the scenes. You weren't looking at different ones. Everybody was looking at the same scene. But did you notice that some people saw one thing first, but other people saw something different first? And when you saw that first thing, was it real to you? Yes. So the people that saw the other thing, was it real to them? So in other words, what we're saying is, we both agree that we can look at the same thing and both swear that we're seeing something totally different, but that we swear it's real. Isn't that kind of crazy? How can we both be looking at the same thing and trying to agree that it's not the same thing? How about over here? What do we see? Mr. Frog says he likes the frog side. You're right. Horse and frog. Frog is there, and horse is the whole thing.
I guess one thing, and I really didn't even think to bring this up until just now. So, okay, you see a horse, right?
I see a frog.
So what do you think would happen if that frog said, you have to be a horse? I have to be a horse. So that I think like everybody else, I act like everybody else.
Because when everybody looks at it, they keep saying it's a horse, so it must be a horse.
Now, what could happen is this frog keeps being told they have to be a horse. And they have to do this, and they have to do this, and they have to act like that. And I don't know, all kinds of other things. Well, do you think that frog might get a little frustrated because they can't be who they are? Do you think that maybe that frog over time might get angry?
Yeah.
Do you think that they might act out?
Yeah.
Why do you think they would do that? Is it because people or the horses are telling them they can't be who they are? So, do you think maybe understanding that the frog doesn't gallop like the horse, the frog hops? Now, the frog is being told he has to gallop.
I've never seen a galloping.
Right? He has to neigh. And so eventually what happens is because that frog is so frustrated because he just wants to be himself. He just wants to hop because that's what he does the best. And that's what he learns. And he needs to learn to take a little bit of the horse, right? The horse's strengths with him, so that the two of them can communicate out in the animal world, and that they can be friends. Because they can each learn from each other and learn from each other's strengths, right? You don't have to change people or change animals or change anyone. You just need to understand. That's all. So that kind of just came to me as that there.
This will give you a little idea. Sometimes when you're dealing with people who are neurodiverse, we're not as good at processing emotions and understanding our emotions as a lot of people are. So if you look at it just over on this side, for a lot of people in the neurodiverse, we basically have two kind of emotions. We're happy or we're not happy. And they're big buckets, whereas most of you have a whole range of, you know, you're really happy, you're kind of happy, you're a little sad. Things are really bad now. It was a bad score on the test. The problem is, though, you can see, if you're trying to translate, if this person is trying to tell you something about them not being happy, you don't know which one of these numbers. Are they telling you they're a 6 and it's kind of like, yeah, it's bad but not terrible. You know, maybe they need new sneakers. That's bad. Or is it a 10? They can't go to the, to the basketball game they want to go to, and that's a big deal. You don't know because the way it just doesn't translate. There's no translation to it. And same thing in the other scale. Now, sometimes you'll run into people that we refer to as more high functioning. They just are able to get by better with other people. And what they really have is in the middle, we just have another little bracket. But we still are dealing with the same problem of it's a little closer to understand going back and forth, but it's still not accurate. So you can get a lot of confusion of this person saying, well, it's okay. Well, for you, okay can go from being, yeah, it's pretty good, or pretty bad to, yeah, it's pretty good. But you don't know how to interpret them, and they don't know how to interpret you. So that's one of the big things to watch out for, is making sure that you're understanding what they're trying to tell you in a way that you understand.
And you can ask them, what did you hear when I said that? Or how did that make you feel? Or, things like that. You guys are smart. You know how to think up things like that. I mean, it's a game. And it's just getting to understand the other person.
This is just some of the things that, as being a person who's neurodiverse, that we just kind of have to deal with all the time. And, I always like to say, because neurotypicals are what most of the world is, the neurotypicals think us neurodiverse people can be annoying at times. And we probably can be annoying at times. But you know what we say? You neurotypicals can be really annoying at times too. So, what we're doing is a lot of times we're doing this. We're butting heads, the neurotypical and the neurodiverse. I mean, you just can't agree on anything. We're the traditional square peg trying to fit it in the round hole. I even say, at times, we're the alien sitting in the classroom. We don't have maybe the same interests as everybody else. Maybe our interest is in science and everybody else is interested in the Broncos. Right? So just a different interest. So fitting into a neurotypical world for us, it's a lot of work and it's struggle, which means we need a little bit of help being accepted because we're working so hard at it.
It's also I would say it's also a very lonesome world, because they are so different. It's hard sometimes to be around them. I mean, and I say that because my husband is at times difficult to be around. You know, but we have to learn. And that's what we had to do. We had to learn, okay, I see you're starting to get upset. I see you're starting to do, you know, make me upset. How about we just maybe separate for 2 seconds, you know, for 5 minutes? How about I go take a walk around the block, or you go take a walk around the block, just to get ourselves where we're not anxious and we're not upset or in a different place, so that we can come back and we can just be okay.
This is just kind of pointing out that, you know, sometimes we want people to act a certain way. But the thing is if you don't have the capability, whether it's the brains or the muscle, if it's sports or whatever, it doesn't matter that I want you to be this great. You know, maybe math isn't your subject, but I want you to be great in math. But you only have this math skill. Expecting you to be that good, if that's your skill, is going to get frustrating over time. So remember, sometimes you're dealing with people that aren't as skilled in areas as you are, so you got to help them in those areas.
When I was in school, I was very bullied. I was very quiet. You wouldn't know that today. I've taken a lot of training to get away from that. And I was very quiet. I was very lonesome. I was anxious. So like I ate lunch alone a lot. I would be picked on a lot because I was so quiet, because I didn't fit in. And when I grew up, I owned a company. And the one thing I can tell you is today is where you're at. But this is a part of your life. It's not your whole life. And bullying and picking on people and criticizing, those things, they absolutely stay with you for a long time, sometimes for the rest of your life. And what you don't know is today it's fun, but tomorrow, that person that you picked on, that you criticized because they were different than you, may be the person you have to go to. 1, to ask for a job. 2, because so many times the very brilliant Asperger's, autism, they have extremely brilliant minds. These are the people that may actually come and create a cure for cancer or a cure for something else that you need in your life, because maybe it's you, it's your child, it's your parent, it's someone who's important to you that you want to save. And it's that person that maybe because they were different in school, you thought was weird, crazy, and just didn't fit in, so you just pushed them aside. We all want to be liked. We all want to be accepted. We all want to be cared about. So I hope that, I think this is the conclusion.
Oh, I think it pretty much. I think there's something that says like
it
conclusion
needs to be
at the
conclusion.
end, but
This is the conclusion. So I hope the next time that maybe you see someone being criticized for being different, how they act, the color of their hair, they're tall, they're short. I'm very short. I wore heels today so I could be tall. Just, you know, whatever. You're going to go through many things from today onward. Stand up for that person. It's okay. You know, if you're afraid because, oh, I'm going to be criticized by whatever, the popular, the different, the, you know, whoever. It has to end. And so it can start with you. So I hope you would speak up and say, you know, that's just not cool. It's cooler to accept Or if you can't do that, don't become a part of it. Maybe just walk away and don't add to the frustration and the pain of the person who is being ridiculed and put down. And that goes for teachers as well as students, because there are teachers who will absolutely point people out, kids out. And so I ask all of you to maybe join us on our journey as we try to make a little difference.
So
Okay?
what they're passing out to you is we put together a little tip sheet to give you some ideas of just how to get along and work better with maybe some of the neurodiverse kids. And we want to thank everybody for letting us talk with you.